You may be wondering what I'm doing. Well, designing chairs is far more complex than most other pieces of furniture. A dresser, a table, a coffee table, end table, other forms of furniture you might interact with on a limited basis. But a chair you're going to sit in. Hopefully you're going to get some time to sit in it for a while. And as you sit in that chair, you want to be comfortable. Now, mass producers of furniture will often look at the statistics of how tall the average person is and how heavy they are and so forth, and follow along with the quantity or the masses of people in the area that they all seem to be closest to. What that creates is a piece of furniture, in this case a chair, that is close for everybody, but not comfortable for everybody. And I often find that chairs are very uncomfortable for me. And I'm really not that disproportionate to the population, at least in my mind. I'm about 6 feet tall and I'm, well, these days a little over 200 pounds. But my approach to designing chairs is far more involved than just about any other piece of furniture that I design. And I have to take into account many attributes. Chairs, as I mentioned, are much more functional than most other pieces of furniture. You sit in them, you move them frequently as you get in them and get out of them. You may have to slide it up to a table while you eat. They're just far more functional. Typical dresser, about the most interaction you have with it is to open and close a drawer. So I'm going to take a few minutes in this issue to explain some of the attributes about chairs, chair design, and some of the techniques that I go through in this process of designing and building a comfortable chair. Now, this particular chair is part of our casual set that's basically patio furniture. So as far as styling, being one of the primary attributes of any piece of furniture, the styling for it was somewhat already dictated when I designed the table. I wanted it to be casual. In my case, it's outdoor furniture. So I don't want it to be very formal looking. So in this case, as you'll see shortly here, it's your very basic ladder back chair. The wood is cedar, which is a good outdoor wood. Matches, of course, the table that we constructed in the last issue. So being cedar and casual and a ladder back chair, that really defines it somewhat as a very casual chair. Now, I wouldn't really want to have green-filled, lacquered mahogany for a casual chair. That would just simply take it out of the character of casual. But styling is one of the attributes. Now, there are some things on here that we're going to change as part of this little short story on design and prototyping a chair. But first, let's go through a few more of the attributes that we have to consider when building a chair. Now, function is one of those attributes. You have to be able to get in and get out of a chair easily in order for it to be useful. So it has function. Primary function to hold you up in a comfortable position. But there are secondary functions as well. You need to be able to get in, get out. You need to be able to, as I phrase it, scooch it up to the table. You're going to stand, lift, and pull as you work your way up to the table where you're going to be dining. So it has to be able to tolerate that function. So the primary attributes on function for this are to hold you up into a sitting position comfortably and to be able to move it forward and backward without it falling apart on you. One feature you'll notice on a lot of chairs is this cross stretcher. And of course, that's a structural element. And you'll notice that it's set back from the front legs. Now watch as I go through and move this chair forward. My feet stay stationary, but the chair slides forward. Now if that stretcher is too far forward, of course it's going to hit the back of your foot and it's going to hurt like the dickens. So again, you have to take into account somewhat styling with regard to function. Another feature or functional feature of a chair may be the integration of a cup holder into the armrest. In this case, this is designed to actually be placed next to a table, so I'm not going to incorporate that functional aspect. Now, comfort is another attribute of chairs, and one that is of primary importance to me with regard to chair design. Everything has to fit right. It has to be comfortable. If I'm going to sit in it, I want to be comfortable. Now, as I mentioned, mass producers of furniture will follow the statistical size and proportions of people, make one size fits all. I tend to look at things a little more casually. When I designed this chair, I started out, measured up all the different chairs that were around me. Office chairs are a great prototyping tool because many of them are very adjustable. You could raise and lower the seat, raise and lower the armrests, vary the tilt of the back and so forth. And that's pretty much where I got the shape that it's currently at. Now, there's a few things that just simply didn't work out right for me that I don't like. One, the armrests are too low. As I'm sitting here, my elbows don't even rest on top of the armrests. So I'm using a couple sticks of wood, a couple cut off scraps to try different heights. And at this thickness, the 1.5 inch thickness, it's still too low. So if I go this way, it's just a little bit too high. It's pushing my shoulders up, and that'll create a real stiff neck. Being too low will create a stiff neck because you're pulling your shoulders down, trying to reach for that armrest. That's what your intuition tells you to do. Your arms should rest on an armrest. Armrests should be somewhat parallel to the seat. The seat itself should be tilted back or down towards the back edge of it. Not a lot. If you tilt it down too much, that tends to put pressure on the back side of your thighs. This front edge on the seat should be rolled over or rounded over so as not to create a pressure point with a sharp edge of that front slat. Getting in and out of the chair, as we mentioned, was an important functional aspect, getting in and out. Now, as you get older and your hips get a little wider and you get those love handles going, getting in and out of narrow seats with armrests of this shape can be a bit of a challenge. So you would curve these armrests out a little bit. You'd create an inside curve and an outside curve, and that opens up the area so that you can pivot in and out of the chair. The back angle of a chair is another very important aspect that has to be paid attention to. Now, you'll notice that nowadays most people sit much more slunched. They are slouched rather. They slide their butt forward and then they lean back. Now, of course, some people will also try to tilt back in the chairs, and that can be defeated with a little bit of careful design. But nonetheless, we're much more casual sitters today than we were years back. That might explain many of us having back problems as well. However, that back angle does bring the center of gravity backwards on your upper body and put it into a more comfortable position. If you bring that tilt back too far, now you have to pull your head forward, again creating an uncomfortable situation which will result in a stiff neck. It's around a 3 to 5 degree angle on that backrest that seems to be somewhat the sweet spot. Again, everybody's different. Now, as far as contouring this particular chair, right now it's just got flat slats on it. No contouring whatsoever. The edges are rounded over a little bit. It turns out it's actually very comfortable. You wouldn't think that sitting on the flat slats should be comfortable, but everybody that sat in the chair has commented that it's really very fine. But if you want to contour the seats, we could bandsaw a little bit of a radius in it to accommodate the butt, your thighs, as well as your back, because none of those are truly flat, or at least not for most of us. So those are just some of the attributes as far as comfort. Now, another one that I find seems to be a problem with almost all chairs that I sit in is the seat height. Now, we mentioned the angle, rounding over this front and so forth, and contouring, but the seat height, almost all chairs to me are about 1.5 inches too low. I like my chair a little bit higher. If I'm sitting up proper, like I should be, my back comes up tight against the backrest because I have the seat length, or as it's referred to, the depth, front to back, just about perfect. It supports my back well in the lower area and the upper area. So the seat height, if it's set properly for me, my thigh is supported from front to back and my back comes up against the rest. If the seat gets too low, now your front portion of your leg comes up off of the chair and more of the weight of your body is transferred towards the back area of your butt as you're sitting in the chair. It becomes much more uncomfortable. But if you're a cross-legged sitter, that's going to happen naturally anyhow. The height of the back up in here, that can be a problem for many people because of the shoulder blades tend to, if the height, the top edge, is just the right spot, your shoulder blades can catch on there. And it just seems like it digs in right underneath those shoulder blades and creates a very annoying chair to sit in. So this pretty much covers some of the attributes as far as comfort of a chair. Now I've gone through, prototyped this one following a very simple construction technique. It's very flimsy as far as the slats and so forth. You can see these are just tack nailed on with small brads. The framing components are held together much more sturdily so that I could sit in it for a period of time and have different people sit in it and try it out. So now let's take a look at some of the structural elements of a chair that make a good chair and a bad chair, and we'll talk a little bit more about the prototyping aspects. Now, as mentioned, these stretchers at the bottom of the legs are a structural element. This particular one that goes from side to side needs to be set back from the front legs to clear your feet as you slide the chair in or out. The joinery between these three elements, this cross stretcher and the two side stretchers, to the legs and to each other, needs to be a fairly sturdy joint. This is not a critical joint. If these stretchers actually fell out, the chair is going to be fine. You'll actually see many chairs designed without stretchers, and they'll last for many years. But it does add strength. Now coming up on the legs, of course, this back leg is probably the most critical member of a chair. This back leg holds up the seat, carries the majority of the load of the seat, as evidenced by when people rock back in a chair. That's a very natural position for you to position the weight of your body relative to a chair. We shift our weight towards the back legs. Now, as we slide back or lean back in a chair, we're trying to pull this leg back and we're trying to push the seat area down towards the front. So we're taking this structure like this and trying to do this as we lean back in that chair. So that creates this joint area right here as being, to me, the most critical joint on a chair. This is the one that will suffer the greatest amount of stress, as well as, if it fails, the chair is no longer useful. So this really needs to be a mortise and tenon joint, in my opinion. I don't think there's any other type of joint that is as strong as a mortise and tenon joint for joining the side rails to the back legs of a chair. Now up near the front, there is another joint here that's going to be mortise and tenon in the design, just out of convention, but this particular joint does not need to be as strong as the one back here. Now, as far as the slats where we're going to be sitting for the bottom and the backrest, really gravity's holding them in place, and it requires very little to mechanically fasten them to the chair. Many people will go through a very elaborate process of screwing them down, purchasing either bronze or stainless steel screws and so forth. Unless these slats can defy gravity, they're not really going to go anywhere. Even the back slats, there's not a whole lot of stresses working against them to pull them off the chair. Everything we do to the chair is to push the slats into the chair. So you don't need to get too carried away with that. The armrests take a lot of abuse as well. When you sit in them, if you hunch over and put a lot of weight on your one shoulder or the other, you're going to transfer a lot of load onto the armrest. So the armrest really needs to be supported both at the back and at the front. Now you'll see many chair designs take that front leg, extend it up to support the front edge of the armrest. At the back edge, it's usually attached to the back leg. In some cases, it's even a curved piece of wood coming off of the back leg. So you do need to have some pretty decent joinery for these armrests to make it functionally strong. Now, if I were making this chair out of a hardwood, just as we did with the table, we build with softwoods heavier than we would with hardwoods. So in this case, I'm using almost a full 1.5 inch thick stock for the framing members. If this were a hardwood chair, I could easily drop that down to 1 inch or even possibly 3/4 of an inch stock. But adding that extra mass to this softwood adds to its overall strength. Now, as I mentioned already, this is my prototype chair. It's going through a variety of changes. I'll be lowering the seat a little bit. I'll be altering the lower stretchers, raising the armrests up and so forth. Now, if I were to have done the prototype in mortise and tenon joinery, this would be taking me forever to actually prototype out. And I really don't need all that extra strength that a mortise and tenon joint is going to give me for a prototype that's purpose is for demonstrating to me fit, as well as some of the finer areas where the joinery gets rather busy or complex. So I turned to one of my favorite joinery methods outside of the tradition, and that's pocket hole screws. I'm literally everywhere where there's a solid joint that needs to be, that would be all the framing materials, I'm using 2 pocket hole screws. That allows me to remove the 4 screws on any of the stretchers and move it up or move it down, reattach it, and then sit in it again. I can make 10, 20 changes in the matter of a couple of hours and not have to go through and remake any of the components. So pocket hole joinery is not only good for permanent joinery and so forth, I find it's a tremendous added benefit when doing prototype work where you need something fast, quick, and easy that you can drill the pocket holes, screw everything together, try it out. If it doesn't work, you unscrew the screws and you can move the various components to further refine the prototype or the design. So pocket hole screws are not only good for permanent construction, they're a great benefit for the prototype work as well. Now, there are even more considerations when designing a chair than what we've already talked about. And one of them has to do with how the chair functionally comes up against the table. Now, most tables, of course, have a top, but they will also have a skirt that goes around to support that top. Now, the armrests oftentimes have to fit underneath that skirt in order to bring the chair up tight against the table. Now, that would be really critical for a dining table. However, for a casual table, especially an outdoor piece of furniture like this one, that attribute is not nearly as important. So I'm not sure yet if I'm going to alter the design to allow for these armrests to fit up underneath the table, or if I'm going to stick with it in a more casual and comfortable sense, wherein it's just simply more comfortable, but yet doesn't function as nice when eating at the table with it. So that's yet to be decided. Now what I'm going to do is go through and start knocking this thing apart, taking the armrests off, raising them up, lowering the seat down a little bit. I'm going to be doing some modifications with this lower area, and we'll show you a couple of those real quick before we get into the construction in a separate segment in this issue. And this is what makes pocket hole joinery so great for doing rapid prototyping like this. Now, another great tool for rapid prototyping is a brad nailer. You can nail together a chair like this, except for the framing components, but all the other items, very quickly. And if you don't like it, they're very easy to take apart again. Well, here you can see where I've just tacked on that short extension block to the front leg to support the armrest. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. It's purely a prototype. Now, one of the things that I wanted to change was this bottom stretcher. I'm trying to get it to look a little bit more like the foot area on the table we built in the last issue. This is a pretty radical change from the original design, and I don't really think it's going to work, but nonetheless, you have to give it a try, and it only takes a couple of minutes. Well, in just a little bit of time, I've been able to take this chair pretty much apart, put it back together again using those Craig pocket hole screws in the brads. Now, this is the one detail that I'm still real skeptical on. I'm not sure I like it. It's very different for a chair to have that type of foot area. Of course, it replicates the foot area on our table very nicely, but I'm just not sure if I like it yet for the foot area on the legs. I may go back to the old system that I had in there before. The seat's been dropped down, the armrests have been raised up. Again, just a few brads, and we were all set to make that quick prototyping change. Another change, I've added that curved crest rail on the back of the chair. And it seems to be okay. It's not too fancy, still works well with the casual look of this chair. Of course, being sanded up and rounded over a little bit might look a little bit different, but I don't think it's none too fancy for this type of chair, and it seems to finish off the top. Well, it feels pretty good. Sitting in it and so forth, certainly feel the height change in the seat, and especially the armrests. Just not sure yet. I think there's still some more changes that need to be made to it. Perhaps I'll bring it in the house, read a book in it, perhaps watch an issue of Woodworking at Home magazine, just to see what feels right and what doesn't. Give it some time and not make any quick judgments on it. But what I hope you've witnessed with this demonstration on how I go about prototyping a chair is a very functional piece of furniture. It's something that you become connected to. You will spend a lot of time in very close contact with it. You might as well take the time to go through a prototyping stage like this, if you're designing your own chairs, to make sure that it's going to fit your body very comfortably. Chairs are a very, very personal type of piece of furniture. Now, even if you're working off of a chair from someone else's plans, such as ours or out of another magazine or perhaps a book, you still may want to, either using plywood or some other cheap timber, build up a prototype of that chair to see how it fits and conforms to your body. And that's pretty much what I wanted to convey in this story on rapid prototyping a chair. I'm Chris DeHut for Woodworking at Home magazine. Thanks for watching.